In today's session, we're going to be learning about, are women obligated to count sefira? Why or why not? And if they are, would they count with the bracha? Or if they aren't, are they allowed to count a bracha and know what's the story? In short, I realize that people a lot of times don't make it to the end. So just to say the basic halacha from the beginning, and then you want to stay and you want to get all the details, please stay because there's a lot of information that's about to be presented. In short, we have a fundamental argument if women could count with the bracha or not. The general halacha is that they're exempt from sefira, and the reason is because it's a mitzvah שהזמן גרמא. It's a time-bound mitzvah, in which case women are exempt for it, and the reason for that is a whole discussion in and of itself. There are around 10 of these mitzvahs that women are exempt from. Some of them are very big mitzvahs, that's why it became a famous topic. So they are exempt. However, the Magen Avraham, the Mishnah Berura quotes this, says that women accepted sefira upon themselves as an obligation even though they're exempt. How exactly does that work is a major discussion of itself, which we're going to tackle. But the Mishnah Berura says in the continuation that if they count, they should do so without a bracha. Based on this ruling, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach holds that women, if they would count without a bracha, and that's what all females in his house did. However, the Stipler, the females in his house would count with the bracha. Also, Rav Eliyashav Zatzal says that a woman who is precise and scrupulous with her mitzvah performance, who is a chachma, she's wise, and she's a isha's chaver, the wife of a talmid chacham, can count with the bracha. Seems like the custom among many is for women if they are going to count sefira, not to count with the bracha. We're going to have to see the reason as we continue. It should be pointed out that for women who are Sephardi, they certainly should not count with the bracha because they don't make a bracha on any mitzvah that is time-bound. That is the basic halacha. That's basically the summary in 2 minutes of the general halacha. Now we're going to see where exactly this ruling comes from and this psak. So we're going to begin in the chronological order over here. A fascinating machlokas, an argument between the Rambam and the Ramban. The Rambam in Hilchos Temidim Umusafin in Perek Zayin, Halacha Chav Daled says that this mitzvah of sefira applies to everyone in all times. However, Noshim v'Avodim Peturin Mimenu. Women are exempt from the mitzvah of sefira. The Kesef Mishna over here on the right side, which is highlighted, says that why are women exempt? Very simple. It's a mitzvah שהזמן גרמא and a mitzvah שהזמן גרמא noshim peturos. So therefore, they're exempt from it. That is the Rambam. This is the general halacha that women are in fact exempt. They do not have to do sefira. This is before the Magen Avraham comes up with this insight that they accepted upon themselves like an obligation, which we'll come back to. The Ramban, however, in his commentary to Maseches Kedushin, in the first parak over here on Daf Lamed Gimel, longest parak in Shas in terms of Daf, says mitzvos asher she'ein hazman grama shir tuva sefiras haomer. The Ramban holds that the mitzvah of sefira is not time bound. Now, obviously, we have to figure out what the explanation of this Ramban is. Seemingly, the mitzvah of sefira is completely time-bound. After all, you only count 49 days. It comes only a certain part of the year. It's a mitzvah such as man grama. How could the Ramban say it's not? We're going to come back to that Ramban in Mirza Hashem. This is the general machlokas over here. Now, let's just discuss the general halach over here. The Shulchan Aruch Harav, this is the Baal HaTanya, says over here in Hilchos Pesach in Siman Tov Pei Tesef Beis that women are exempt from this mitzvah because it's time bound. In some countries, the women, they said that this is an obligation to do. And don't say it's like a prohibition over here. Don't say that they're doing something prohibited, that even though that they're exempt from the mitzvah of sefira, they're still saying a bracha. Says the Shulchan Aruch Harav, don't say that what they're doing is prohibited, that it's a problem. It's not. That's the Shulchan Aruch Harav. The source for all of this, the mother of all sources, is basically the Magen Avraham and his we're close to opening comments to this siman over here. The Magen Avraham in Sifkot Nalf, the first Os in Siman Tov Pei Test Halachas Sefiras haomer. The Magen Avraham quotes this Rambam. It's also a Zohar al Pi Sod. For Kabbalistic reasons, women should not be counting sefira. And the Magen Avraham says Noshin Peturus in the highlighted section Sefira Davi mitzvah שהזמן Gromah. Then the Magen Avraham inserts his own words. Umihu kvar shavya kar. It's discussion exactly to pronounce this word. Shavyaihu alaihu choiva. They already equated it. They made the mitzvah of sira upon themselves like an obligation. In other words, says the Magen Avraham, even though the general halacha, yes, is like the Rambam, the Zohar, in which case the mitzvah of sira is time bound and therefore women would be exempt. Nevertheless, they made it upon themselves like an obligation. Does anyone else hold like this Magen Avraham? The answer is yes, pretty much everyone. The Chok Yaakov in Oz Gimel quotes this Magen Avraham word for word. Similarly, the Ber Eitiv quotes this Magen Avraham word for word, that they made it upon themselves like an obligation. What exactly does that mean? If you're exempt from something, how could now you twist and turn it around and make it upon yourself as an obligation, as something that's obligatory? Very good. The Pri Megadim over here in the Eishel Avram suggests Umasha Kesef Shavya Le'achoyve Efsher Kitfilas Arvis V'Sarach Ian. It could be like it's mariv. Mariv, we know that we have a fundamental Gemara in Brachos, which we learned on Chav Zayin and Beis Kav Ches. We have a machloikes between Rabbi Gamliel, who holds that mariv is a choiva, it's a full-fledged obligation, and Rabbi Yeshua says that mariv is rishus. It's optional. If you want to daven mariv, Shemona Esrei. If not, so then don't. Shema, according to everyone, for sure is an obligation. We know that from the Poskim. Taisva says when Rabbi Yeshua says that mariv is optional, that means that if you have another time-sensitive mitzvah, now you could do the other time-sensitive mitzvah, and mariv, Shemona Esrei becomes optional. However, if you don't have that other time-sensitive mitzvah, for sure you could have in mariv. Nevertheless, nowadays many, or pretty much the main great Rishonim say that we accepted mariv upon ourselves as an obligation. Says the Pri Megadim, it could be that how we, the male gender, accepted mariv as an obligation, so too the women accepted sefira as an obligation, even though they are exempt from it. So the Pri Megadim says Sarach Ian. This requires more research, which of course we will attempt to do. This is basically the Magen Avraham. Before we continue, let's just go straight to the Mishnah Berura over here. The Mishnah Berura comes along and says, in Oz Gimel, opening up the Siman also towards the beginning. This is the Mishnah Berura now adding words after the Magen Avraham. In our countries, seems like the custom is for women not to count, says the Mishnah Berura. Why? Because of the sefer Shulchan Shlomo, Shulchan Shlomo says that if they would count, they still would not recite the bracha. Because for sure they're going to make a mistake with one day, and also most cases they do not know the explanation of the words. So there's a tremendous amount of insight in this Mishnah Berura over here. That number one, you see, he says the custom is for them not to count. But then after he says, by the way, if they are going to count, they shouldn't say bracha. Why? Because they're going to make a mistake and they don't know the explanation of the words. So let's discuss the first reason, because it's the most misunderstood reason and perhaps misunderstood reason in all of Hilchos Sefiras haomer in general. What does this mean that the women are going to make a mistake on one day? Don't say that it means that they're going to get knocked out of sefira because they're going to miss counting one day, and then they're going, all of the brachas that they said in the previous days are retroactively going to become null and void, because that would not be true. The brachas would still count. Rather, what this means is that they're going to make a mistake, meaning they're not going to know that the halacha that if you miss a day, that you're not allowed to continue to count with the bracha. The halacha is that you count without a bracha. They're going to think you need to say a bracha, they're still going to be saying a bracha. Now, the second reason of the Mishnah Berura is because they don't know the explanation of the words. The problem with this Mishnah Berura, and the question that could be asked on the Shulchan Shlomo is, wait a second, men also have this issue. There are plenty of men who are illiterate, or they just don't know the Hebrew translation, number one. Number two is that there are plenty of men who do not know this halacha. If you miss one day with the bracha, then the next days you cannot count with the bracha. So the basic answer to this question is Medina Me'ikar Hadin, from the letter of the law, women are completely exempt, like we already saw in the Rambam and the Zohar and the Magen Avraham, etc. So therefore, since they're exempt technically to begin with, and now we're throwing in, coupled with these halachic not ramifications, these halachic concepts and principles. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berura, quoting the Shulchan Shlomo, they shouldn't count with the bracha. Why? Because they're exempt from the letter of the law. Number one. Number two is because they're going to make a mistake, and you count without a bracha, perhaps. And number three, they don't know the explanation of the word many times, as opposed to men, which are obligated mikra hadin from the letter of the law. So that would be the difference between men and women. So that's the general basic background information that we have over here. Let's take a look at what the Pri Chadash says. The Pri Chadash comes along and says, "Kosav Arab beperak anitzka denoshim avodim peturus b'mitzvos sefira uboru hul dekol mitzvos asher shizman grama nasher peturus." It's obvious. Any time-bound mitzvah, women are exempt from. Period.
That was who?
That was the Pri Chadash. Let's just see quickly look inside. This is the Orchas Rabbeinu that we quoted before, the Stipler. That the woman in the house of the Stipler would in fact count sefira, and they would remind all the females to count. That's the Stipler. The Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says completely different, though, that we quoted above as well. Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach says, Misha Oser La'avor Nituach. If someone's going to undergo a surgery, in which case the surgery will take more than a 24-hour period with the recovery, b'mei sefira. And then because of that, you're certainly going to use a day or two, and you're going to lose the bracha, so to say. You can continue counting with the bracha as much as you're able to. In the footnotes over here, in the Orchos Halacha, in footnote 95, he says, "In the house of Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, the females would not count sefira." This coincides beautifully with the previous Mishnah Berura that we quoted, which is, it seems like nowadays the custom is for women not to count sefira. You got to know, kid, not kid, how busy you are.
I thought we said before that they counted without a bracha.
Yeah, correct. The Mishnah Berura, before he quoted the Shulchan Shlomo, who says they count without a bracha, says it appears that the custom is for women not to count at all. So therefore, in Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's house, they would not count. Footnote 93 is the Shulchan Shlomo. He says, look in the Shulchan Shlomo, which is the source of the words of the Mishnah Berura. He says that the main idea is because sheperish devorav de ikar mishum she'acher kach yemshichu lispor v'yeh birchasem shebekam ve'elach levatala. Because afterwards they're going to continue to count with the bracha, in which case their brachas would be invalid. It would be null and void. It would be levatala. In vain is the correct word I was looking for. It would be in vain. Footnote 94. Look at the Avodas Kodesh Lechidot. Say from more be'etzba. Some Reish Hazayin shekasav kain gam le'inyan kol adam. The efsher sheyishkach v'lo yuchol lisbar bracha. V'mafreya hayu kol habrachos meleilu shavar latala. They want to say the other way. It could be that no. If now you know that at a certain time you're going to be unable to continue counting sefira, you're going to miss a day or two, could be that you couldn't count, that you shouldn't count with the bracha to begin with, and if you did so, all your brachas that you said before would be retroactively invalid. What was that word? Levatala, in vain. That's the word. It would be in vain. All your brachas levatala. Yeah, that's the chidah. Entertaining that possibility of brachos levatalos lemafreya. Yeah, that's what he would say. Brachas that are in vain retroactively. The Davar Halacha says no. This case that we said would not be a bracha in vain if you know that you're going to be missing. Why? Because right now you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You have surgery 30 days into sefira, don't worry. Right now you're obligated to count with the bracha. Forget about what's going to happen in 30 days. Furthermore, maybe the situation could change. You won't need the surgery anymore. You know, so don't do it. V'lo damim l'mashakasa Mishna Berura l'gabe nashbel yivarchim yishuk d'stamid yishchul lichs v'dachsu mechu adin har yipitus mitzvah. Don't compare it to what the Mishna Berura said, quoting the Shulchan Shlomo, that the woman shouldn't count with the bracha, because that case, it's assumed that they're not going to be able to make it through the 49 days of Sira, and coupled with the fact that from the letter of the law, they're completely exempt from this mitzvah like we saw. So therefore, those factors together equals this is a conclusion, aka that they should not count with a bracha. Comes out that Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach holds that women should not count with a bracha.
This coming to the whole Torah is about a mitzvah boy, he gets by mitzvah and
yes, the Minchas Chinuch, yes, it's a good shiloh. We're gonna get to that in Mitzvah Hashem. Comes along Rav Eliyashav Zatzal and says, no. Women don't come in all one size and one shape. That's not how it is over here. All right, it depends on the situation. B'shamati Rav Yosef Shalom Eliyashiv Shlita sheisha chachma midaktektes b'maaseh v'isha schavar yachoylu levara kol sefiras haomer. All women are different, says Rav Eliyashiv. No one is the same. If the woman has the following resume, then she can and should count sefira with the bracha. And here's the checklist of her resume that needs to be met. Number 1, she's a wise woman. Number 2, she's careful with her actions that she does in her mitzvah performance. And number 3, she's married to a Talmud Chacham. If all of the above, those 3 boxes are checked, says Rav Eliyashiv, then she can and should count with the bracha. So it depends on the woman. Know your woman. Halichos chag b'chag. That's where this is located. If you want to look it up, it's on page Chaf. Page Chaf. That's what he told her. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Close to this psak. Close to the psak. Know yourself. Comes along. Now let's discuss. We quoted a Ramban. The Ramban says that the mitzvah of sefira is not time bound. We have to obviously figure out what that means. Number 1. Number 2, we have to figure out, so far we're left with at best, that sefira is similar to mariv, says the Pri Megadim, just like we accepted mariv upon ourselves as an obligation, so too women accepted sefira upon themselves as an obligation. But the Pri Megadim concluded and said, צריך, this requires more research, so we have to do that research together. That's what we have unanswered right now. But before we get to that, let's take a look at the Piskei Teshuvos. He quotes the Zohar inside, which the Magen Avraham quoted, if you recall, that we learned together around 10 minutes ago or so. The Zohar, the Arizal say that women should not count sefira. Why? Says the Zohar, this is a quote, V'in onun yoimin tedachyav. Yoim the haomer the duchra. Sefira is all about the male gender, says the Zohar. Lo imser cheshbuna da elo le'alav v'chulu begin de'ilin yoimin le'gadvai b'lechudayu. Basically, in English, the Zohar is saying the mitzvah of sefira just belongs to the male gender and the male gender only. However, Rambam Yesh Nahagin Kepshitus Devya Magen Avraham Shenashim Kibalem Kechayvas Sus Bracha. Some accepted this Magen Avraham. No, women accepted it upon themselves, like the Mishnah Berura originally quoted. Before he quoted, it seems like the custom is for women not to do it, and if they would, they wouldn't do a bracha. No, some women do it. And if a woman is going to count, the husband has an obligation to remind them not to forget to count. Footnotes. Points out a very crucial point down over here in footnote 43. The Beis Yosef, that's the author of the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, in Simin Yod Zayin Beis, which of course is the halachas of Titzis. Comes after Chafei. It's okay, you weren't with us yet. And in Tovkov Pei Tes Sivav says it's Osir Lenoshim Levarach Al Mitzvah Shehazman Gama. Well-known machlokes Rishonim. According to Svardim, it is prohibited for women to recite a bracha on any mitzvah which is time bound. aka that list of around 10 mitzvahs, they are not allowed to say the bracha. V'lechein, and therefore comes along the Kapachayim in Sefkat Tes and says, "Ein lanoshi b'nei svar to list for the sefiras haomer." If a woman would count sefira, it would certainly be without a bracha if you're a Sephardi woman. Shail Tzachuvas or Letziona B'Tzion Bein Shalu and Chele Gimel Perek Tes Zayin Osches says that even if they would count without a bracha, Ubetoiros Nedava Ein Rashayos, says the Or Letzion, women stay away from sefira. You got other mitzvahs to focus on.
Wow.
Leave this mitzvah for the men. Says just like we don't try to light the Ner Shabbos, so do. Stay away from this. Says the Rambam, the women have no shaychus to this mitzvah. No connection at all they have to this mitzvah. Therefore, the Sfardim, definitely for the Sephardi women, do not enter warning sign. Hang it in. You got the Zohar, the strong, and therefore women have to be, for the Sephardi women, have to be very careful about this sefira over here. Take a look over here now at what the words of the Minchas Chinuch. Take a look at a Minchas Chinuch. Mitzvos Chinuch over here in Siman Shin Vav. Machas of sefiras haomer, towards the beginning of this mitzvah, and 80 words in, says Nashim ve'avadim peturim mitzvah zoidavi mitzvah שהזמן גרמא והאם Magen Avraham the Kesef Mishna. He quotes the Magen Avraham. The daven is a צריך. Says the Minchas Chinuch, what are you talking about over here? V'hu davar chadash. This is something new. This is an insight. The Nashim im kiblu aleihem la'asais mitzvah she'im peturos yeschayvu memnei the shavya alayhu chayva. Wait a second. Women, they accepted upon themselves to do a positive mitzvah that they're exempt from. Now they just be turned obligated. How do you do that? It's like magic. 1 second you're exempt, the next second you're obligated. Who said? Says the Minchas Chinuch v'loy ra'isi came b'shu makom. I never saw such a thing in any place, says the Minchas Chinuch. What is going on over here? What's out in the Magen Avraham, the Mishnah Berura? How do you reconcile that? Oh, shots fired at the Pri Megadim. This is checkmate. Don't compare this to what the mariv, aka, essentially he's saying, Pri Megadim, you're wrong. Don't compare this to mariv. Ayin b'rishonim. Kanyesh deos. He doesn't say why. He's just saying, forget about you, Pri Megadim. He doesn't say why. It's a hit and run. Furthermore, let's not forget the fact that there are opinions who say it's prohibited for them to perform a time-bound mitzvah. According to everyone, says the Minchas Chinuch, there is no mitzvah for them at all. How then can they make themselves obligated in this mitzvah? Where's the Magen Avraham coming from? I understand the Magen Avraham is coming from a Rambam, from a Zohar, women are exempt, it's time bound. That's good. For the Magen Avraham to say that they made it on themselves like an obligation, says the Minchas Chinuch, where are you coming from, Magen Avraham? You're wrong. Pri Megadim, you're wrong. Everyone's wrong. Mishnah Berura is wrong that he quotes this. I mean, the Mishnah Berura continues and says the custom is for them not to count afterwards. But where are you coming from? So you know what the Minchas Chinuch answers? Nothing. Then he moves on to another topic. This is what you call hit and run, a halachic hit and run.
Chinuch himself also says not to do.
Yeah, Chinuch says it. Chinuch, at the end of the mitzvahs, always quotes the situation with the mitzvah when it's a custom, when you do it. V'nohagas mitzvah zoim sefira zoim midaraisa b'kol makom b'zechorim. The obligation, but only for males.
That's pretty clear cut.
So this is what you call a HHAR halachic hit and run. HHAR halachic hit and run. That's it.
You should at least give it a reason.
No, he doesn't say anything. He just said, "Don't compare it to mariv." Finish. I don't need to give. Who's I'm the Minchas Chinuch? I don't need to give you a reason. Come on. All right, that's the Minchas Chinuch over there. You got to look at the Bishuli HaMincha. I had a mental note to bring it in. I have to see what the Bishuli HaMincha says on that. It's great sefer. You heard of it?
No, it's a comment.
Bishuli HaMincha. It's like the Minchas Chinuch. The classic is 3 volumes. Bishuli HaMincha is like 10 volumes. Massive. I'm the Minchas Chinuch. It's for the big boys. For the big boys. If you're already learning Minchas Chinuch, then you're already a big boy. But it's for the even bigger boys. If you're learning Minchas Chinuch, you got to do the Bishuli HaMincha. Anyways, all right, what do we have on deck over here left? It looks like 1, 2, 3. All right, we can't run out of time over here. We have let's take a look at the Avnei Nazir over here. Davnei Nezer, the Sakhachavar, in his Shailus and Chuvas and Simon Shin Pei Dalet, excuse me, which Chelek is this in Aleph or Chayim, says like this. Asher Huksha loy bedivri haramban. Yes, Akasha, what's pshat in the Ramban and Kedushin Lamagimel Lamadal, Shemanas years haomer, Gromma, that you counted, according to the Ramban, the mitzvah of sefira is something that is not time bound. Very Inyan Palai. Whole thing is time bound. What are you talking about? The Efsher could be that this is the explanation of the Ramban. Shirlei Ramban, the Omer lo tloso toyer bezman atzmo shemakrivim ba. Hainu sheakrivo Omer betezayim benisim. Rak the machros haShabbos mitzaragmina basar yoyim tova. When do we bring the korban Omer? Right, which is one of the reasons why we count. I mean, right, we bring it on the 16th of Nisan. Technically, that's not what the Torah says. Torah says memachros haShabbos,
Right.
which means after the first day of Pesach. Huh? Targum on that pasuk is mibasar Yom Tov, after Yom Tov. Right? In Cain, in Zman, Tet Zayin, B'Nisan Goyer. It's nothing to do that. Oh, now the 16th of Nisan became the halachic and official time to count sefira, to start counting it. Oh, at the end of the day, you'll say time bound because it's after the first day of Yom Tov. Oh, good question. Avi Nezer asked that. V'im toimer b'kol makom zman haShabbosu tezvav b'Nisan Goyer. It's always after the 15th of Nisan. Answers the Avni Nezer. Haloi kol mitzvos haShabbos noshim chayavos Pesach u'matzamar. No. But women, as we know, are obligated in Hilchos Pesach. The matzot, the maror, kamla saper, yisias mitzrayim, kos b'chinuch was also speaking about the Exodus. They're obligated as the chinuch writes in mitzvah chaf aleph. They're obligated. Hu hadin omer. Yet hayochel v'ocher machmas shosmanos yom tekor. Same thing with the omer. You can't exempt them because now the time is being caused. It's time bound because of Yom Tov. Kevin shbekol mitzvah shkam tekmashul. Since they're obligated to all of Yom Tov, all the halachas of Pesach. Therefore, this is grouped on. It's tagged on, and therefore they will also be obligated.
That doesn't explain the Ramban. It's a nice reason. It doesn't explain the Ramban.
No, so that explains the Ramban how it's not time bound, and if it's not time bound, then they would in fact be obligated. It's not time.
But it is. He's saying it
No.
is time bound.
Even if it would be time bound, so to say, it doesn't matter because just like Pesach they're obligated, and so to this it would get dragged after. It's not time bound in the sense that in and of itself now it's an independent entity, in which case they would be exempt from. Just to see the language of the Ramban again inside, the Ramban clearly says that it's not time bound. Okay, it's not its own entity that is time bound by itself. It's connected to Pesach, so to say, in which case one will be obligated. That's the Avni Nezer's understanding of this Ramban. And then he quotes the Rambam who finishes that off. Also the Zohar. It's a good kasha on the Ramban. It's an attempt to answer it. It's an attempt. Yeah, it's not perfect. I agree. If you have better, let us know. What is this? I think we saw everything in this folder except for the Oiz Vehadar and the Divrei Malkiel. Let's see, we're running out of time over here. The Divrei Malkiel and the Shilas and Shuvas over here. Where is this? In Gimel, Siman Hay also delves into this Ramban a little deeper. The Kedusha Kesef Mishna Berura she'azman Gromma Yofa Toma. Upashit sheyesham taoso. If it didn't Malkiel, is a different explanation in the Ramban. There's a mistake in the Ramban. V'shayich sham mikoidim gab mitzvah she'azman grama ayin sham. That's the easy way out. He says the Ramban never said this. It's a printing error. V'od yishlomer shayakosef sham. It was an abbreviation instead of mitzvos asay, right? Mem ayin. It said mem tov ayin, which stands for matanos aniyin, gifts for the poor people. Mistake came in, and it said Samach Ayin Hey, which stands for Shiras Haomer. So says the Divrei Malkiel, it's a Toho Sefer. There's a mistake in the Ramban. Can't be that the Ramban said that Shiras Haomer is a mitzvah saseh. She'in hazman grama. That is not time bound, in which case women will be obligated. Says the Divrei Malkiel, easy way out. It's a mistake in the Ramban based on the abbreviations, V'Roshei Tevos. And they messed it up. So it meant to say another explanation in the error is it said Samach Hey Ayin, but the printer thought that it meant Shiras Haomer. Samach Hey, ayin v'rosh tevos seder havoida. No. Maybe it meant seder avoda, the order of service, as opposed to sefiras haomer. Either way you try to answer this Ramban, I mean, you got very interesting situation. That means the woman would be obligated in korbanos accordingly. But the printer thought it stood for sefiras haomer, and when they printed it without the abbreviations, then they wrote sefiras haomer. And it's known among the experts that this type of printing error is actually pretty common. It's a different malkiel. Sefira you gotta do. If you don't do it, then you're not gonna have shvuos. It makes sense now that women would be obligated in Sefira, I'll tell you. Really, the mitzvah of Sefira you could hypothesize, you could claim, is not an independent mitzvah. Rather, it is preparation for the korbanos on Shavuos, which women are obligated in which case the Ramban, even without coming on to this answer that there's an error with the printing, would in fact be obligated and it wouldn't be time bound. Right? When we obligate on the korbanos and sibur. Exactly. So those are around 3 or 4 different approaches how to explain this Ramban, who says that the mitzvah of surah would in fact not be time bound. Just to look to see if we left any rocks which were not uncovered. Take a look at those Vehadar Mishna Berura over here. You can also see where we're coming from in that explanation of the Shulchan Shlomo. Basically starts off by giving a little bit of an introduction to time-bound mitzvahs and the women, they're not being obligated. The Gemara in Kedushin Chavtes teaches us that women, we learn out that are exempt from time-bound mitzvahs from the mitzvah tefillin. That just like the mitzvah tefillin is time-bound and women are exempt from it, so too any time-bound mitzvah women are exempt from. The reason why tefillin is time-bound is because we do not wear tefillin on Shabbos and Yontif. See the last parak of Maseches Eruvin towards the beginning of that parak. And even midrabanan, the rabbis didn't obligate women in this. However, typically, if they want to perform mitzvos such as שהזמן and grummas, they could Ashkenazim hold even with the bracha, except for sitters and tefillin, which are exceptions, as we discussed in the past, and the recordings are on rabbiban.com in the random NCM section regarding that. Wouldn't be considered a bracha in vain for Ashkenazim. The reason why they're exempt, simply, the Rishonim say, is because women have obligations towards their husband, towards their family. And if they're going to be obligated in time-bound mitzvahs, it's possible that when they're going to perform a mitzvah, their husband might perform them to do something else. So now, if they're going to now perform the mitzvah and forsake what their husband told them, then that's not good for their husbands. And if they're going to do what their husband told them, but not Hashem, then that's not good for Hashem. So therefore, the Torah just said, okay, you are exempt from time-bound mitzvahs. There's a deeper explanation also based on Avraham, Rav Shimon Schwab, that says that women are shatzani kiratzona. They're made more complete, and they don't need these time-bound mitzvahs to give them the energy and the spiritual charge that we as males need. That's why we need milah. We were born imperfect. The women are more perfect, so to say, and therefore they don't need it. That's another explanation. Okay, we find also by the mitzvah of sota that Hashem's name is erased in order to foster and create the shalom bayis, the peace in the house, which is incredibly important. But there are many time-bound mitzvahs that women are obligated in for different reasons, such as rejoicing on Yontiv, Hakel, Kiddush, eating matzah, Megillah, Ner Chanukah, many of which we have discussed at different times. Okay, that is basically their introduction. They say over here that the explanation of the Mishnah Berura that we said before, that they shouldn't make a bracha if they would, because they would continue counting. They're not going to know that it's prohibited to continue counting with the bracha, and then they're going to make a mistake and continue counting with the bracha on the other days. Okay, in the footnotes, I think that we pretty much covered actually everything that they say in the footnotes. A lot of the sources came from this. Here's the Divrei Malkiel over here that we saw. Okay, the Chinuch. Yeah, they explain over here the Pri Megadim a little more. You can't compare it to mariv, right? because of a Darchei Moshe. This is really explaining the Minchas Chinuch. Because the Darchei Moshe in Kuf Pei Ches, we only have 2 minutes and we're going to get knocked out, says that technically mariv is optional according to everyone. Meaning, excuse me, you could only say that you made something obligatory on yourself, on something, right, which was originally optional,
Here it's
according to
exempt.
everyone. Shelo shayach loimer shav yechova al davar shu rishus l'kol hadeos. Right, over here, women are completely exempt. Therefore, you can't say over here by sefira that they accepted upon ourselves, unlike Mar, which was an argument to begin with, so that's why you can't compare the two. There's also a Maharil who says that women are exempt from shofar because it's time bound. However, once they already said that they are obligated, now they should make sure that they're in shul to hear shofar. Which is also interesting. So you see from there that after they accept it upon themselves, they're obligated. That's already another question because shofar also they weren't obligated from. So now how could they make themselves obligated in that? We'll have to learn about that more in shofar. That really doesn't flow nicely with this idea. Yeah, they also explain the Shulchan Shlomo down here. So this is an interesting concept, how they can make themselves obligated in something. I mean, the best explanation that we have is this, which is questionable because
Say the right that
because of shofar.
we know that tefillin they're exempt, and there are places like maybe that's where Rabbi Yosef comes from. Right, Berura, who she's the one who put on tefillin, or somebody's.
Yeah, it's a taisvus in Eruvin over there. We discussed that on the tefillin. That's an exception. It wasn't.
It was an exemption. I'm saying that exception.
It was Michal Bashal. Bas Melech Shiny. That's the reason.
Right. So maybe saying, maybe he extrapolates from there. Maybe I'm just saying,
This doesn't stem. How sefira and shofar. They're not connecting nicely. They're not connecting. Sarachian on this nakuda. But this is a general summary of the main sources and everything. I think this is a well-prepared summary.
Yeah, excellent.
Good. Okay, so Amir Hashem tomorrow we'll continue. By the way, I saw all this stuff last night. I had in mind. I said